Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. I am still in Nashville, having a great time, love the state. At my son's house, we are going to be filling and setting up a container garden. These are 10-gallon root pouches and 20-gallon root pouches. I sell them at my seed shop. Previous video, we set up these raised beds, got the peppers in, the tomatoes in. So I'm going to show you how to kind of mix the soil, put in organic fertilizer, get the bags filled up, or your containers. It could be any kind of container. If you're using containers, make sure they have drainage. You always want containers to drain. Fabric pots will do that on their own. Most expensive part of gardening is really filling your beds or your containers. And here's the problem. Like I said, I'm in Nashville. Normally, I live in Maryland. When you go to the stores, the big box stores, they always have different brands. And it's always a mystery of what you're going to get in the bags. And some of the stuff is better quality. Most of it's a mystery. Here's the point. This is a more expensive raised bed mix. And when you take a look at it, like I was showing you in the previous video, it's mostly wood, peat moss, and a little eye candy perlite. Doesn't look much different than this compost and manure, which really to me looks almost the same. And it's a lot of wood. I don't see any kind of soil, no sand, no clay, anything like that. This company and this company are exactly the same. This is called topsoil. This is called compost and manure. And when you take this out, it looks really similar to the stuff they have in this bag. And they all look, I don't know, pretty much the same to me. Compost and manure, $2.50 for a cubic foot. $3.50 for a cubic foot. Why not just buy this? This is about $4 to $5 per cubic foot. The only difference really between these is that they add in more peat moss. And peat moss you can get cheaper. That's 3 cubic feet. It was about actually $18 here in Tennessee, which is cheaper than Maryland. You can get topsoil. This looks terrible. It has some wood in there, some sand in there, clay in there. You would never plant directly in this. But blending this in with these materials or blending it in with the peat moss makes a really wonderful container mix or potting mix, and that's what I'm going to show you. And it costs less money than buying the big bags of potting mix that can be anywhere from $14.99 to even $17.99. It gets really, really expensive. I have many recipes for soil, so just use these as guidelines. If you were able to take earth out of your ground, 50% earth, 50% peat moss, and then we throw in any organic granular fertilizer in here. I'll show you how to do that. And that is a perfectly fine container mix to get you growing and get things started for you. Rule of thumb, we're going to go with this cheap topsoil that is not just wood and peat moss. It has sand and clay in there. We're going to pretend this is the earth. A third of this, a third of any of these products, and a third of peat moss will make a good mix. It's going to drain well. It's going to have everything you need. And plus we're going to be throwing in water-soluble fertilizer, and we're going to be throwing in organic fertilizer. So let me get started, and again, use this as a guideline. This is basically what we're going to do. This represents the earth. This is, they say this is compost. It's not. It's so much wood in there. But if you had compost, it could be soil, a third compost, a third peat moss. This is just a bagged product, and it could be really anything that you select that fits your budget. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, just about equal parts. And we're going to mix it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this about halfway, throw in a handful of the organic granular fertilizer. That will set up the bottom half, and then I'll do the same thing up top, mix in another handful, but I'll show that to you. Just wanted to show you this is what we're going to end up with. So it's a blend of those 3 products. This would be great. A lot of the bag products are going to have more woodiness in it. Let's just use that as anything wood. Sometimes that can impact how the nitrogen is taken up. Well, let me rephrase that. Sometimes that can impact how the nitrogen that's in the container is used, because the nitrogen is going to go to the wood to help it decay. So it's going to take it away from your plant. So you can fix that by just adding in more water-soluble fertilizer. Now, maybe we think this is too much of one or too much of the other. Go ahead and just add in what you want. Like I think this could probably use a little more earth. And you know, you can make something like this with the 3-bag products. Maybe you have some compost. You want to throw in a couple handfuls. It doesn't matter how you do it, but you want the consistency of a container mix to look something like this. It's about halfway full, blended through. Now, again, I'm trying to show you ways to save some money. If you are in a time crunch and you have to put something in here, any of the potting mixes that you can buy in stores or anything that says container mix, whatever's the cheapest, you could just put directly in here. This is plant tone. Any organic granular fertilizer. They're all basically the same. They have the same ingredients. As long as they have N, P, and K represented. That's a 533. Could be a 447. Could be a 254. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about the name on there. Don't get sold onto buying the bags that say pepper fertilizer, tomato fertilizer, leafy green fertilizer. Just pick one. Whatever's on sale, whatever's organic, whatever's granular, and a handful. If your hand's bigger, that's fine. If it's smaller, it's fine. One handful. This isn't even quite halfway. You don't have to be exact. So we're putting in the organic granular. That's going to break down slowly, feed the container plants over the months. We're also going to be using water soluble. That feeds the plants immediately, and just mix it in. And I will, you know, fill this all the way almost to the top, put in another handful. This will be ready for planting. I'll show you how to do that. We're going to drop in some pepper plants. I think I have lemon balm and lemon verbena, and we're going to put some seeds in here too. So the first part will really be setting up the containers. The first part setting up the containers, the second part planting into them. And this is going to work really nicely. I'm going to be putting the pavers down over there too, level out the ground, put the pavers, and that's where the container garden is going to be. When you're placing your containers, you want to be thinking about a couple of things. Southern sun's over there, west sun's right here, sun tracks that way. So you want to be placing them either on your deck or on the ground where they're going to get at least 8 hours of sun. I'll also be explaining to you how to plant in them in case you have, you know, a couple containers in a row. You want to have the bigger plants in the back, so when the sun is coming in, the shadows are falling away from the smaller plants. You might be planting in the smaller containers up front or something like that. Fill to about, 1 or 2 inches from the top. This would be great to add in some mulch. You can, if you have compost or making compost, you can put compost on top of there, grass clippings, something like that to help manage the moisture, feed the plants. But second handful, just something like this, organic granular, and just mix it well into that top 4 inches. And this container is set up and ready for planting. In a 10-gallon container, you can actually put in 2 pepper plants. The more plants you put in, the more often you have to water. And a whole key with containers is matching the mature plant with the size of the container. So the root balls of, let's just say, a tomato plant, cucumber plants get really large. So at minimum, you'd want a 10-gallon container. I recommend the 20-gallon container for a indeterminate tomato, for a cucumber plant, for a squash plant. In the 10-gallon determinate variety tomato, 1 or 2 pepper plants work well. Something that's just going to stay smaller. You can grow bigger plants in smaller containers, but you may have to water them 2 or 3 times a day when the plants are fully mature and you're into the July sun. I just filled up the 20-gallon root pouch. I'll show you that in a second. Now it's possible maybe you can't find, you know, bag compost or manure or topsoil. That's more the woody kind of stuff. This is the topsoil from a different place. I got this actually at Ace Hardware. That was from Home Depot. This has more clay, more soil product, more earth product. And then that's your raised bed mix or your potting mix that you can buy that's a premium. That's your peat moss. What's the point? Maybe you can't find all 4 of these things. Or maybe you don't want to mix all of this. If you look at or check out your local landscape companies, very often they have a blend of garden soil. You can order that, have it delivered. That will help you fill a lot of containers. You do want to check it out, make sure it's quality. Maybe you don't have any peat moss and you can't find it. So any of the woody bag products, again, you have to check them out, whatever's on sale. Half that, half of a topsoil or half of your earth. It's still going to be loose enough, it's still going to work, you can grow in it. And again, we're adding in the organic fertilizer. Maybe you can't find the earth, or you can't dig it from your yard. Half peat moss, half of any of these products works really well. And it's always golden if you find true composted manure that has been broken down and aged, and it's real legit stuff, not like that. I don't even know what that is. You can always use that 1/2 or 1/3 to whatever kind of mix you're making. But these are just options. You don't have to spend the $14, $17 for a bag of premium raised bed mix, potting mix, container mix. In fact, all the names change. There's no regulation on this. Pick what works for your budget. Now, let's just walk over here real quick. Those again are the raised beds we just built. Those are the pavers that are going down. Any organic granular in a bigger 20-gallon container, it was 1.5, 2 handfuls halfway, another 1.5, 2 handfuls up top. 10 gallons, about a handful each level. 20 gallons, about 2 each level. All right, I'm going to set up this spot, fill up some more of these containers. We'll get to talking about more fertilizing, how to take care of them. So we're going to do 4 of the fabric pots today. Set up where I want them to be set up. And you want to go, I've already soaked in those 3. Soak in all your container mix. Peat moss takes a while to really absorb water. You want to activate all the organic granular fertilizer in there and really put in like that much water. It's all going to drain out. We're not even planting now. You want it to settle too. There's going to be plenty of air pockets in here, and we want it to settle. So it has air pockets, it drains well, but you're going to see that it sinks. So that premium mix, in quotations, will be used to kind of fill the top and leave about an inch space on top, and then we'll get really to planting. For trellising, I like to use 6-foot bamboo posts. You put them right along the outside of the pot, and then you would go all the way up and you would tie them together up top and make a teepee. And that's a really great support for tomatoes and other plants that vine. You can even grow a cucumber in there. All right, so let me finish this up. We'll get to planting. This is the fun part. We're going to plant up the containers. That's a poblano right there. That actually gets tall. Poblano peppers tend to get 4 feet. So I'm going to use the trellising to help support that as it gets taller. I'm going to be planting it in the back because the southern sun is going to come this way. Sun will come right into there. In the front, I'm probably going to put some basil seeds or some parsley. I'll show you how to do that real quick. I'll be doing a whole video on what you can plant in July, and that can, you know, give you some idea of what you can replant and what you can get started, obviously, for the month of July. Smaller peppers right there, again pushed back so I can put more herbs in there. Lemon verbena in the front, lemon balm in the back. That's where the lemon herbs will go for the kitchen. And in here, I'm going to put in rosemary. You may be struggling with rosemary. Let's just actually start here. You know, get your transplant, loosen up the root ball a little bit. These are all going to get watered in with the water soluble at the end. I'll show you that, and I'll talk to you about watering. Rosemary doesn't like to stay soaking wet. So whenever you're planting transplants, even though this whole section might be moist, the root system isn't out there. So you have to water these new transplants a little more often than you might think, every day, every other day, for a good 10 to 14 days until the root systems fill up the container. And then you can water accordingly. You know, it may have to be every other day, every couple of days. Really depends on the size of the plant, how hot your summers are. The trick with rosemary, and we're already planted up, is it likes to be dry. Containers will always dry from the top down, from the sides in, so there's moisture down there. You really want to see this dry up top after it's been established for that 10 to 14 days. Let the top dry, you know, maybe the top inch or so. When you dig down, you'll still see moisture in there. If you keep this wet all the time, sometimes rosemary doesn't do well. Let it be a little more drier than you might think. Other plants we want to water more regularly, and your rosemary will really thrive. All right, let's go over to this side. These are all going to get watered in with the water soluble. These were on sale, 50% off, because they're beat up, they're yellow, they don't look great, but there's growth coming. All these need is a water soluble fertilizer. The roots are pretty tight, they're root bound, so you want to break them up, get them going in different directions, and this guy will be okay. We're going to water it in again with a water soluble fertilizer. You could use Miracle-Gro, you can use the chemical types. They're not going to hurt you, they're not going to hurt your plants. There's no real soil life in here. You're not damaging soil life using the chemical fertilizers. That is pretty much a myth. If you use chemical fertilizers instead of compost, instead of other things 24/7, yeah, you'll have a problem, but not occasionally or even fairly regularly. The whole key to a great garden is compost, not that organic granular fertilizer or not even the water soluble organic. You need organic matter, and that comes in the form of compost. The lemon verbena is going to go right in here a little bit deeper. Organic matter is what feeds the soil life, feeds the worms, feeds the plants. It just is wonderful stuff. So this is planted up, and again, it's going to get a water soluble fertilizer. Pepper, same way. I'm not going to do all three of them because it's the same way. And this is so easy. This container mix is all fixed up. Remember, we soak this. It looks pretty good. It drained. There's no real worry about overwatering. You want to take a pepper plant, put it in, go a little bit past the level that it was at, press it in, and now we have the pepper plant set up. Okay, let me finish that up, and I'll just show you real quickly how I put in the basil seed and the parsley seed. The whole idea for a garden is to grow what you like. So my son and his girlfriend like peppers. They want this to be a kitchen garden, so we're going to put in basil. Basil is best grown from seed. If you're buying plants at stores, you're paying a whole lot of money, and those plants usually don't thrive. For $2 you can get a pack of basil seeds. Highly recommend the Bentley Seed Company. This pack will last you a couple of years. Seeds last for up to 3 years if stored properly, even longer. We're going to drop some seeds in right here, and I'm just going to make a line just like that. Sprinkle them in, cover them over. Sometimes I just put them on the top, mix them in to about 1/4 of an inch or so, press them in, water them in. They will go in first. 3 weeks later, I will put some more basil seeds over here. So these will be growing, these will be behind it, and this helps keep a continuous supply of basil going to your kitchen. Same thing with garlic chives. It's going to be the same basic idea. Chives, garlic chives, and regular chives are perennials. I'm going to put them in right here, let them get growing. They may not be ready this summer, but they'll establish, come back next year, you'll have more chives than you really need. And then we're going to put parsley right into this space. Probably just do one planting. Parsley is a biennial, so it lasts for a long time. You can keep cutting it back. It is really the basil you want to keep planting every, 3 or 4 weeks. There's about 12 seeds in there. I'm just going to actually just sprinkle them in this space, just like that, and then just mix them so that they fall below the soil. Smooth it out, press it in. We only used a fraction of the pack. This is probably like maybe what, 20 cents maybe for this planting, rather than paying $4 for a plant at your big box stores. 3 weeks later, we'll plant over there. Same thing with the chives. Garlic chives or chives, pretty straightforward. I mean, there's a good amount in there, maybe 15. Just sprinkle them across the space, and then just work them in about 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. They're going to germinate. Now, I put in a lot of basil seeds. You may want to thin them down to 3 or 4 plants. That's up to you, or you can lift out, if more comes, move them to a different place in your garden. You just don't want to put in 1 or 2 seeds, be waiting around for them to germinate, and they don't. So I always like to overseed, and you could do the same thing when we get to the parsley. Parsley seeds, I don't know, maybe 8, 10 there. And I'm just going to sprinkle them around in this space, 1/4 inch deep. Just make sure that they're covered, and then press them in. All right, let's get to the water soluble fertilizer. And again, remember that the root ball for this plant, for all your transplants, are really small, so they're not accessing all the moisture here. That's the biggest tip with containers, is you really have to know how to maintain the moisture. So for the first 10 to 14 days, you're really just soaking in this space, and then those roots will establish. One strategy I'm using with the placement of these containers is that they stay in the shade a little bit through the morning. Now as it's approaching noon, the sun's starting to move out, and you can see the sun starting to fall. Containers that are baking in the sun 10 or 12 hours, the plants can really not get damaged, but with the heat of the summer coming, the soil heats up, plants shut down, they don't produce as well. So it sounds weird, but keeping these at really about 8 hours of sun is going to make a difference. They're just not going to sort of shut down. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, other plants, when the soil gets really warm, they tend to shut down until the cooler temperatures come. And cooler meaning, instead of it being in the upper 90s, temperatures are falling back into the upper 70s, lower 80s, maybe even upper 80s, and the plants tend to do okay. I'm using a water-soluble fertilizer that is the chemical type. They are really high in nitrogen. So any chemical type, I just use at half strength. So this is like 2 gallons. I think you're supposed to put in a tablespoon or a tablespoon and a half. I just pretend that this is 1 gallon, so I'm using less. Water-soluble organic fish emulsion, AgroThrive. I'm affiliated with them. They're really good to use. It's a really good water-soluble to use, the AgroThrive. It has the NP and K in a good balance. Recommend that. Check out the video description. Just follow the directions for your organic water solubles. First time these plants are being fed, I'm going to soak them a little bit more. But at this size, you don't have to feed these plants every week with an organic water soluble. At this size, maybe once a week, maybe once a month. When they get triple size, maybe 3 weeks. When they get more to full size, you could be, feeding your plants every 10 to 14 days, depending on what's going on. But there's plenty of organic granular in here. Plants this size once a month with an organic water-soluble fertilizer. Just want to show you, just give them a good soak. And you want, something like that. The seeds, just soaking the area in. And then give them a little more, since this was the first time the water soluble is going down. And that's all you really need to do. The NP and K and water soluble will be immediately available to the plant. It'll help them establish, and it'll help them grow roots, grow leaves, get larger, all that. But you don't have to overdo it. You don't have to overcare for your plants. So I will do that for all of these. This will get them off to a great start. Thanks so much for watching. Use everything I showed you today as guidelines. You don't have to be exact, don't have to be perfect. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. And don't forget, let me show you these real quick. Because they're struggling, I'm going to give them more. Extra nitrogen for plants that look like they're struggling a little bit. Because there's a lot of wood in here, you could give them extra water-soluble nitrogen like this. But you just don't have to do this every month. Maybe the first time, you're just jacking up the nitrogen, help these plants green up and be healthier. That's the beauty of the water soluble. Lots of rain, lots of watering will help wash the water soluble down. Your container plants will do beautifully. Again, please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com, and thanks for watching. Good luck in your gardens.